Do bad people get what they deserve? Yes! But what actually happens is something that no one talks about. It's not hell. It's actually something far more intense. You see, after they die, they have a life review where they go through and experience every moment of pain and suffering that they caused their victims. Now, what I've learned from studying reincarnation and the afterlife for over 3 decades is that what happens next is even more surprising. Today, I'm going to break down what really happens to cruel souls after death, from everyday abusers to Hitler. Yes, we're going to talk about him too. Okay, so this question comes from a viewer who wanted to know what happens to truly awful people after they die. I think that we all kind of wonder that, right? When somebody does wrong to us or when we've seen really horrible things happen in the world, we hope that there is some sense of justice, that there's some sense of balancing that happens out. And indeed, yes, there is. It doesn't always happen in this lifetime. As we know, we would love to see instant karma. Sometimes it takes a few lives to work out. But let's talk about how it all works, starting with hell, right? Because that's the old story that when you do wrong, you will go to hell. Is there a hell? Well, yes and no, really. There isn't a hell that people get sent to by God or angels or some divine entity that decides you're going to be punished, so I'm putting you here. What happens, and we know this from people that have near-death experiences particularly, right? Some people, when they die, they do experience a really horrible negative place. That's not because that is a real afterlife destination. It's more because it's what their self or their soul expects. When they have done horrible things and they recognize and know that they have done horrible things, or they perceive themselves to have done horrible things, they will often send themselves to hell after they die. And hell is more like purgatory. It can be different based off of what the person's expectations are, but it's a very uncomfortable, unpleasant place that they will hang out at until they realize that they don't need to be there, and until they get enough awareness and awakeness that the spirit guides that are there to help them bring them over to the actual other side will hang out until that divine, beautiful moment happens that they kind of wake up from their dark stupor. So yes, when they die, it is very possible that they go to something that is a hell-like experience. But eventually they will wake up, they'll get out of that, and they'll be then taken over to the other side where they will begin their rehabilitation process. Now, the first part of that process is accountability. This is the life review. I've talked about this in other videos. It's the thing that on a daily basis, I'm like, oh, if I did something to hurt somebody's feelings, I know I'm gonna have to experience that from their point of view. Now, that's one thing when we're talking about, say you said something ignorant or rude or unkind. Now imagine you committed mass murder. Imagine that you tortured people. Imagine that you've done all these other horrible, unnameable things that human beings are capable of. When you do that life review and you've done really big bad things in the world, you have to experience that. You go into the actual experience of the other person. You become the other person and feel all of that pain and suffering. Why do we do this? It is because we want to fully understand the implications of our actions. We want to fully understand our behavior in the world. So when we do a thing, we want to see the outcome of that thing. The good news is that we also get to experience this on the positive side. We also get to experience all the joy and love and light that we've brought to other people. So that is what I am hoping for and looking forward to. But when you're talking about someone that has done evil acts, you can imagine that they then need to experience the impact of what they've done from that individual's perspective to truly understand the implication of what they've done. So that's not a fun experience. And you can imagine the more horrible acts that have happened, the longer that process is going to take. But then as they go through their life review with their spirit guides, they do also look at the context of what caused them to do those things. If they had a horrible childhood where they themselves were abused, if they had rejection, if they had biological conditions that caused this, it is important to understand the full scope of the behavior and the impact. So they look at their childhood, they look at where they were wounded. They also see along their life all the various different points where a different decision could have been made. So this becomes a coaching experience for them, so that they say, oh, if I had only taken this path, it would have ended differently. So as we're talking about Hitler, which I'm going to dive into a little bit deeper in a moment, you can imagine he was a student of art. He really loved art. That was his passion. There was a moment and a decision point where he left art behind to go down a different path. So as they are reviewing their life story with their guides, they are seeing these fulcrum points where things could have gone a different way, so that they can understand and recognize, hopefully on some level in their next life, when that decision comes up again, or that type of decision, and how they can choose differently for better outcomes. And so with all of this, I look at the entire picture, the entire story of their life, from the harm that they caused, from the reasons that they did it, and from the overall larger impact it has in the world. They are not seen as evil, as broken, as irreparable on the other side. The other side, the guides, angels, God, whomever you want to label, they look at these people, these beings, with compassion. When you commit evil and harmful acts, it hurts your soul. It damages your soul. So there's also compassion for what they have done to themselves in causing such horrible harm in the world. But there is also accountability, right? It's not just like, we love you, it's okay. It's, we love you, we need you to understand why what you did was not the best, highest choice. And we need you to be responsible for the consequences of your actions. You need to own this and do better. Okay, so that's all happened. They've had their life review. They had the coaching session to review things. Now they need to go through healing, because as I said, they've caused damage to their soul. Depending on the level of harm they caused, it's going to be the level of harm that they've done to their own soul, their own entity. You can't hurt other people without hurting yourself. Luckily, the reverse is true. When you love other people, you're also loving on yourself, and vice versa. What happens outward happens inward. So because they have caused such trauma, they've damaged themselves, and they need to go into the healing center and get some healing on and get some repair work done, so that they can get to a better place, so they don't continue to perpetuate this trauma in future lives. And speaking of energy healing, if you didn't know, I actually do energy healing. If you would like an energy healing in this life and not have to wait until the other side, you can learn more at JillianHarrington.com. I'll post the link down below. And if you're finding this interesting, learning about how reincarnation in the afterlife works, make sure to subscribe so that you can get more content like this. And if there's something that you want me to dig into, just drop a comment down below. I read every comment, and I do use them to inspire videos. This video is an example of that. This was a comment from a viewer that I was like, yeah, let's dive into this. Let's find out what happens to bad people after they die. But let's get back to our evil friends and see what they're up to on the other side. Okay, they felt all the pain. They went through their life review. They went through their healing. And they've probably spent some other time on the other side doing a lot of educational work to get ready before they're ready to get back into form. Now, depending on how much harm they caused, could mean that they might be on the other side for a little while before they're ready to incarnate again. Because the other side isn't just wanting to drop damaged, broken, harmful souls in on us, though it can feel like that on this planet. Feels like we've got a lot of them, but that happens, we forget, and old patterns can repeat themselves. So they begin to plan their next life. they need to look at what relationships they need to balance out. If they've done harm to another person, they will most likely choose to incarnate again to try to balance that out. This can be a little weird. It means that somebody that murdered us might be somebody that is actually in our family dynamic or a closer relationship. It's a little weird to think about it that way. I know it weirds me out. But this idea that we are then connected on a soul level when some egregious harm happens, and that needs to be karmically balanced. So maybe you were on the battlefield and somebody killed you. That person might end up being your cousin in this life because you had something that you needed to work out. So it was important to be in close proximity. They're also going to want to put themselves in situations where they can experience the negative consequence of their behavior from a past life. What might that look like? So let's say they were somebody who was in power and ended up being very destructive with that power, very harmful with that power. They then might find themselves in a life where they are impacted by other people who are misusing power, who are using power in a destructive way so that they can understand the other side of the coin. And then, of course, there's karma. We love karma, right? We like to, in our modern society, we like to talk about karma as if it's a punishment, right? Something bad is going to happen to you to punish you for what you did. And that is not what karma is. Karma is about balancing. The universe wants balance. Your body wants balance, right? Homeostasis. When there has been a harm or an imbalance, you're going to come into your next life and try to balance that out. Like in positive ways, it could be that if you were somebody that took care of somebody else your entire life, it might be the next life you're being taken care of so that it's a balancing act. So in the sense of these people that have done bad or are evil, if they have created harm to another person, perhaps then in their next life, they come back to try to course correct on that. So if they've taken away a life, perhaps in this life, they focus on saving it. If they've damaged somebody, perhaps they come in and they focus on healing, depending on where they're at their soul evolution. And it could be that they wait for that karmic balancing until they are old enough to be able to really participate in that. So they may have done really harmful things 5 lives ago. And in this one, now they're ready to incarnate as a doctor or a nurse to then do the healing to help people because they've learned, they've experienced the other side, they're no longer choosing that path, and now they want to rectify their choices. So they really want to start to do the repair work. They also may have lives where they're faced with similar circumstances to give them the opportunity to choose differently. It may take them many lives to recover from a damage that they've done in that life. So as I said, they might choose to recreate some of those situations to choose differently. They may choose to experience vulnerability. They may choose to experience powerlessness. They may choose lives where they're focusing on empathy and healing and restoring balance. Depending on how long ago that life is, the options in the lives to come can vary. And what lessons are they working on learning? I mean, obviously empathy is one of them, right? But safety is a big one. Safety is a large lesson that people are learning when they are abusers and they are damaging other people. They're often doing this because they don't feel safe unless they have control or power. They will feel too vulnerable if they allow other people to have power, because what could those other people do to them? Right? I'm sure there's some past life wounds, early life wounds that cause them to think, if I have power, if I control people, then I'll be safe and nobody can hurt me. So they will be working through these lives as they're restoring their balance, as they're repairing the damage that they've done. But to be able to learn about safety, that they are safe, that they don't need to control other people in order to feel safe. That's something that they can create within. Okay, let's talk about Hitler. Isn't that everybody's favorite topic is Hitler? But I think a lot of people wonder what happened and what is happening to Hitler, right? This is a being, a person that has created the most evil in the world, at least that we assign as the most evil person in the world. Whether or not he is, I'll leave that up to you to decide. Well, he's going through the same process. It's just a lot more intense. In his life review, where he's going to experience firsthand the impact of his choices, think about the millions of people he impacted. Not only the people that he killed and tortured or oversaw, masterminded, right? The death camps, but also all of the people that impacted as well. The people that lost loved ones, the soldiers in the wars that he started, the family of those soldiers. Think about all of the different people that were impacted because of Hitler's choices. Now, Hitler needed to go through and experience that through every single person's eyes. That was intense, I am sure. So much deeper, much more profound than somebody who has only destroyed 10 lives, right? But millions. And so obviously, this is going to take many, 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 many lives for the rebalancing to happen. And those lives are going to be extremely difficult, right? They're going to be difficult. They're going to be lives where they're experiencing firsthand this level of suffering, this level of impact when you have no power or control over your own life. It's really to break down the ego, to force empathy, to force an understanding of what other people go through. And again, this isn't punishment. This is education. This is understanding things. He went through all of this on the other side, but it's another thing to have to go through this while you're in physical form. Because as we know, physical form, being a human being is really hard and it's really challenging. It's a lot easier on the other side. So it's important for him to understand the experiences that he caused other people through living it in his own physical body. I did do a little research to try to figure out what the mediums and the psychics have said about what happened to Hitler on the other side, to see if there's any more detail I could glean other than the simple, like, this is the process, this is how it works. So what I've collected and what I've heard is that his soul was very fragmented by what has happened. And he is already incarnating, but not as his full soul. He's like broken up little pieces of himself because he can't concentrate too much of his power yet. And he's incarnated into very short lives. So imagine like dying as an infant, dying as a child, that sort of thing, in order to really start to work on clearing out some of that karma. So you can imagine there's a full team on the other side just dedicated to rehabilitating Hitler, because no soul is given up on, right? Every soul has the potential for greatness, but there's gonna be a lot of work needed because he really effed things up in that life. So he's going to need to go through a lot of reprogramming, a lot of understanding of where things went wrong, a lot of lives where he's gonna be vulnerable and powerless and the victim of other people's power decisions. And he's gonna have to do a lot of service work. Once he's ready, once his soul is ready and able to be at that point, he is going to have to make amends to millions and millions of souls. He's going to be very busy once they finally let him incarnate in a full form. I think it's going to be a while before that happens, though. So let's talk about evil, right? Are some souls born evil? I will admit I tend to not play around in the evil and the darkness realm too much. It's not anywhere I want to put my consciousness, so I don't spend a lot of time there. But my understanding is that no souls are born evil. However, things can get fragmented, they can get fractured, they can get damaged. People can lose their connection with source, lose their connection with their higher self, get into a very dark, disconnected place, and get cut off from love and from empathy, and therefore be a victim of or succumb to the lower energies of the human physical body, which has a violent evolutionary nature. That's how we evolved, as we were able to kill things. And so that's part of our DNA and our structure that we rise above. And for some folks, they can't rise above it, or they choose not to rise above it. And as I mentioned, they might also have a need for power. They might also not feel safe. They might feel the need to control others. They might have had a life that all they've known is darkness and meanness and badness and violence. And that is how they are programming. That's their patterns. That's what they know. And so that's the tracks that they run on. So with all of that said, like, what can we do about it? I'm hoping that you don't identify as an evil or a bad person. You shouldn't, because somewhere in there, even if you've done horrible things, is this bright light. So first, no matter what you've done in your life, focus on the brightness and the goodness within you. And as much as you can, and it can be a big ask, but is to focus on the brightness of others in the world that are doing wrong. The more you're focusing on their potential, the more they're drawn to it. So being like the spirit guides, having compassion for people, but accountability, not letting people off their hook from their consequences. That isn't necessarily what compassion and love means. It means to be able to see their potential, their beauty, but also know as a powerful being, they're also responsible for what they've caused in the world. You don't need to save them from their actions. And the more you can focus on leveling up your own soul, right? Because when you have more brightness in the world, when you're bringing more brightness in the world, there's less space for shadows, right? There's less space for darkness when there are more bright souls in the world, because we're magnetic. We're all connected in a little web. And when you can imagine this web like a network, and each one of our souls is on this connection point of these threads. And when we get brighter, that brightness spreads through the threads and then allows the other souls around us to brighten. So if you're wanting to make an impact where there's less evil and badness in the world, focus inward on brightening yourself up, getting connected to love, getting connected to your higher self, getting to a place of forgiveness and letting go of anger and hatred. Hard. I know it's hard, but the more that you can do that and level up, the more you allow others to level up as well. So if someone has hurt you, if you are someone who has been the victim to somebody who has been cruel or evil, first I want you to know I'm sorry that you're going through this. But I also want you to know that justice does exist. Even if you don't see it now in your lifetime, know that there will be an accounting, there will be a reckoning, there will be a balance. The universe has got this. You do not need to be the spiritual police. That is not your job. We're too muddled in human form to be adequate police of other folks. But allow and trust that that will happen in the cosmic game that we are playing. So if you found this interesting about the mechanics of how things work, you should check out my Reincarnation as a Game series. Here's the first episode where I break down sort of the big picture of how it all works. This series is the most comprehensive series on how all of reincarnation works, all of the nuts and bolts that you need to know to win at this game of life. All right, well, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.